had 3 heavy weeks in here, and I hope that what we talk about today is just as weighty and just as beneficial to us, but I hope it's not quite as heavy. I hope it's not quite as heavy. And we talked about some important things that we need to deal with, but I want to get into some other stuff today, and I'm excited to move on. We are going to be looking at the story of Jonah, and the story of Jonah is conveniently broken up into 4 different chapters, so that makes 4 easy sermons. It's got us right there, got it taken care of. And we're going to be looking at Jonah. Now, I've ranted and been on my soapbox about this for a few weeks, but I'm going to say it one more time. It is great that we teach kids. It's great that we teach kids Bible stories, and we should do that. I'm not trying to get anybody to stop any of that. But if you think that you know Bible stories because you went to Sunday school, you are wrong. You are wrong. Because by the time you sanitize it down for a kid and make it easy enough for a kid, you miss a lot. And we keep it to one story, and then we move on. And the thing is, when I say Jonah, what's the next 3 words that come to your mind? If I say Jonah, what's the next 3 words? Jonah and the whale. Do you know how many verses the whale is in this book? 4 chapters long. He's in 3 verses. She, I don't know. There's 3 verses that the whale is in here. And a lot of times people look at this story and they turn away from it because there's a big fish, there's a whale that eats a guy 3 days. Like, okay, I get the story. But the thing is, the story of Jonah is not the story of Jonah and the whale. The story of Jonah is the story of Jonah and God. And the whale's just a very small bit player. And I'm going to say whale, and I'm going to say big fish, and because we're not told what species. Sometimes it depends on how you translate it. It goes back and forth. And there's 2 basic ways that people look. Well, there's 3 basic ways that people look at Jonah. The first one is to completely ignore the Bible and disbelieve all of it. And we're not looking at that opinion today. But there's 2 basic ways that people look at Jonah if you believe the Bible. One is that it's a parable. That it's not a true story, but it's a parable, similar to the prodigal son. It's a story that was told to illustrate a point, and that didn't happen. The reason people would believe that is because it is written as a satire. There's some things that we're going to look at in here, and if we could go back to the original languages, we could see that, hey, this is written as a satire. There's some things that are exaggerated to make a point and to be a little bit funny while it's making a point. But also the elephant in the room, or the whale in the room, the whale that eats a guy and for 3 days. It's there. And so they look at this and they say, this story is just so outlandish that it's not possible for it to be true. But it is true in the sense that it's a parable, and the message it's trying to relate is true. And if you have to look at it that way, I mean, if that's just where you have to be to consider this, then you do that, okay? But I wanted you to consider something. I believe it's a true story. I believe it actually happened. And you say, well, how did a whale eat a guy for 3 days and he came back out? I don't know if you know this, but the entire basis of our faith is that a guy was God and then he died and came back to life, right? This same guy shaped all of creation by the word of his mouth. That he performed miracles and brought people back to life, that he healed the blind, that he made people be able to walk that had never been able to walk before. And if I can swallow the pill of Jesus is God who died and came back to life, I can handle that he made a fish. Well, because there's no species of fish that we know of. You think God can't custom make a fish for a one event? That's God. He can shape all of creation and spin Saturn on his finger, but he can't make a fish. Like, look, if you're going to accept everything else that is supernatural that happens in the Bible, but you can't accept this, you need to question the boundaries you're placing around your faith. Why is this an issue? Why are some of the other things in the Bible an issue for you if you can accept all of that? Because the entire story of the Bible, the entire story that we believe, is that God created everything and set up a natural order, and there are things that happen in that natural order. But that same God loves us enough to intervene in that natural order supernaturally. And if you can't accept there are supernatural things that happen that would not happen on their own, that are not explainable outside of God being able to do whatever he wants to do, then you're going to struggle with a lot of the Bible, not just Jonah. I want to challenge you on that. Because if you struggle with this story because of the whale that's in 3 verses of this story, but you're willing to accept Jesus, I want to know about your faith. I want to know what you're interested in. I don't want to know what you're concerned about. If you have to accept this as a parable today, do it, because there's truth in here, whether this literally happened or not. But I believe it literally happened, and I believe that's the thing that we have to accept, that God is able to do things. If God wants to knock down a wall because people walked around it 7 times, he can do that. He can do that. And that's the thing we believe in, is not a God that intervened through natural processes, but a God who works supernaturally in the lives of people that he wants to save. And that's how we're going to approach it. But we're going to approach this as a literally true story. Now, we're going to start off in Jonah chapter 1. And we're going to do something that we just generally don't do. Okay? We're going to read every verse of this book. That's what we're going to do. We're going to go through and look at this story because it's meant to be read and understood. There are things about this, like I said, that are exaggerated, but they're exaggerated for a purpose, to make a point about this. And so we're going to look at this and see what it is that we need to hear from this story. Now, Jonah chapter 1, verse 1 says, "The word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai." And I want to back up because I didn't mention something. One of the reasons that we look at a parable and say, hey, this is a parable, because Jesus told lots of stories, right? He told the story about the prodigal son. He told the story about the builder. He told all these stories. But one of the things that lets us know is if this is a true story or a parable is whether people's names are used. The story of rich man and Lazarus, we believe, is a true story. Because why? Because Lazarus was an actual guy. Jonah is first mentioned to us in 2 Kings chapter 25. And he's very minor. It's one verse where he gives a prophecy about this. But now we pick up in this book, and we're told that not only is there a guy named Jonah, but he has a father, and you can track them down in history. The word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, "Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it, for their evil has come up before me." And we're going to talk in a couple of weeks about just how evil they were, because Jonah's got some good reasons. I don't think I'm spoiling anything here. He doesn't want to go. Jonah's got some good reasons for not wanting to go because they're really evil. But I just want to kind of summarize how evil they are and what the problem is, okay? So Assyria is modern-day Iraq and some, okay? And Nineveh is the capital city of that place. And what Nineveh did is they were not just evil, they were super-duper evil, okay? They're far over. They're like Nazi end of things. What they would do is, up until this point, they would just raid the nation of Israel. They would come in and they would rape and pillage and murder, which is bad all on its own, but they were especially bad. Even in a place and a time where you're used to being raided and being pillaged and being raped and being murdered, they were especially bad because they would come in and they would find pregnant women and they would slash their bellies to rip out the baby. They would flay people alive, that is, peel their skin off while they're still alive. And they took a lot of pleasure in this. This isn't just your run-of-the-mill enemy and band of raiders. These are evil, evil people. And God says to Jonah, one of his prophets that's on staff just to go carry his messages, that's his whole purpose in life, go to this place, the great city, and call out against it, for their evil has come up against me. That's his job. That's his whole job, is to do that. But Jonah rose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa, found a ship going to Tarshish. He paid a fare and went away down to it to go with him to Tarshish, away from the presence of the Lord. Now, I want to show you something to help you understand what exactly this is saying. Because, I get it. It's, he said, God said do this. He said no. All right. The language there is God says, arise and go. Jonah. This Noza is not a name anywhere. Jonah arose and fled. So the thing is, what they're trying to communicate, what the point they're trying to make here, it's almost like a cartoon where he says, arise and go. And Jonah got up and said, I'll go. Look, a bird. And then yoink, went the other direction. That's the idea. That's the phrasing here. And when it says he was supposed to go to Nineveh, but he went to Tarshish, like, okay, two places. He went there, didn't want to go there. I want to show you this. Nineveh is 550 miles away from where he's at, okay? It's a good trip. Like, this is like going from here to Waco. I tried to find a place that was right about 500 miles. Waco just seemed to be the one that fit. So it's not a short trip, but it's like he said, I want you to go on a long trip. And Jonah said, okay, but instead I'm going to go on a really long trip to Tarshish, which is 2,500 miles away. Now, when we say Tarshish, I want you to understand, like, the whole point of saying Tarshish, is that really where he was going? This is like saying Timbuktu. If I said to you, where are you going? Somewhere left of Timbuktu. I'm going to he's going to the edge of the earth as far as they're concerned. He's going as far away as he can get. They did not have this Google image. Tarshish is the place that's the farthest west you can get. He's not just going to another place. He's going as far away as he can possibly get away from there. God says, arise and go. He arose and went the other direction. And not just going the other direction, but going as far as he can get. Now, what's interesting about this is that the point that the author wants to make is not that he went to Tarshish, or not that he didn't go to Nineveh, but the last phrase there in verse 3, go back 2 slides. The last phrase there, he didn't just go to another city. He didn't just go to Timbuktu. He went, go back 3 slides there. He went away from the presence of the Lord. I want you to see that. Back before the maps. Look at that. There you go. He went with them to Tarshish, but Tarshish doesn't matter. Where it was doesn't matter. Which city it was, he went to the farthest place he could get. Why? Because he wanted to be away from God. Now, the entire point of the book of Jonah is summed up in verses 3 and 4. Jonah rose to flee. Now you're going to have to skip ahead, Isaac. Just go to the next slide after the maps. Jonah rose to flee from the presence of the Lord. But the Lord. That's how verse 4 starts. The entire point of the book of Jonah is that we run from God. And God chases us. That's this entire book, summed up right there. You are going to run from God. We've been running from God for a long time. The very first story in the Bible, what is it? Adam and Eve. They walked with God in the garden and everything was good. But then one day they chose to decide right and wrong for themselves. And they heard the voice of God calling to them as he walked through the garden. Where are you? And they hid from the presence of the Lord. The very first story is that we run and he follows. And that's what this entire book is about. Jonah rose to flee. Where? As far away as he could get. Because he did not want to have to look God in the eye. But God did not look at that rejection and say, fine, that's how you want to be. I'm done. Move on. I got other people. I'm going to call Amos. He can go over there. He'll get this done. But instead, he pursued his child. You are going to run from God. It's going to happen. It's happened before. You run from God before. You've sinned and you've not wanted to look him in the eye, and you do everything you can to keep from looking him in the eye. You stay busy and you work extra hours and you try to keep up more chores and you take on more projects and you keep music going all the time and you keep a podcast or you keep a book going all the time. So you never have to stop and think. You never have to stop and look him in the eye. But God still pursues you. God still pursues. He said, get up and go. Jonah got up and went. But the Lord, verse 4. I think I'm done skipping around now, Isaac. The Lord hurled a great wind upon the sea. Now, this is another one of those really cool things that you don't see here. Here's what I want you to picture, okay? I want you to picture this. Convert to animation in your head. I want you to picture this as a cartoon. God, Jonah. God says, get up and go. Jonah got up and said, look over there, and went. And God turned around, and the idea is that God picked up a storm and hurled it at him to knock him down as he was running away. That's the idea. God didn't just send a storm. God took a storm, and as he was running away, he took it and threw. You've seen the videos, right, where the kid's running and dad throws something and it just knocks the kid over. I have this special skill. I can't hit anything I'm aiming at, but if I throw something in the house, a kid will run through to get hit in the face. Like one time, I think I hit Cooper in the eye, like literal eyeball with a paper plane one time. I just threw it. And he comes from another room, like he just heard somebody calling for him urgently, ran across. Bang. Jonah runs, and God picks up a storm and hurls it at him to knock him down. It's like a stick in the spokes of a bicycle, and it flips his bike. That's what we're seeing here. The Lord hurled a great wind upon the sea, and there was a mighty tempest on the sea. And this is another one of those things that people look at and say, this is exaggerated. The ship threatened to break up. This is not just, the ship is creaking, we got to be concerned. No, the idea here in Hebrew is that the ship thought to itself, I ain't going to make it, guys. Like, this is not going to work out. This is a bad storm. It's to the point that the ship itself thought, I'm going down. This is not going to happen. The mariners were afraid, and each cried out to his God. And they hurled cargo that was in the ship into the sea to lighten it for them. The sailors all got together and said, all right, we have a checklist of gods. Who do you worship? Who do you worship? Who do you worship? Because somebody is mad. This is not a regular storm. Somebody with power is mad. And we got to figure out who it is, but there's no signature on this storm. We don't know what it is. So everybody go through. Let's make sure we've got all the gods covered. We're all going to crowd to anybody that might possibly listen and apologize to everyone just in case somebody made one of them mad. And we're also going to throw everything off the boat to try to live through this. But Jonah had gone down into the inner part of the ship and had laid down and was fast asleep. How is Jonah asleep? Because he's running from God, and when you're running from God, you do everything you can to distract yourself, to avoid him. And Jonah goes down, he takes some Ambien, and he's out because he just does not want to face God. So get up and go. Got up and went on the boat, just rowing away as fast as possible. God throws a storm, knocks them flat. And everybody else around is like, this is nuts. Like, this is crazy. What is happening? What's going on? Because this is too much. Even the boat's like, guys, I don't know what to say about this. This is too much. And the captain came downstairs and said to him, what are you doing? What do you mean, you sleeper? What do you... We're all upstairs, like going through the yellow pages, finding every god we can to apologize to, and you're down here taking a nap. What is happening? What do you mean, you sleeper? Arise, call out to your God. Perhaps the God will give thought to us that we may not perish. And while Jonah was in the midst of hiding from God, running from God, taking anything he could to get him put to sleep so that he could be away from God, a pagan ship's captain came to him and said, what is wrong with you? Call out to your God. Do you not see what's happening? Do you not see the storm that is in your life right now? Call out to your God that he might give a thought to us that we might not all die. We run, God pursues. And sometimes we get to a point that everybody else in our life can see that we're running from God. Everybody else in our life can see the destruction happening around us, but we're so busy distracting ourselves so we don't have to look God in the eye and we don't have to deal with God that everybody else is being wiped out around us because of it. See, God chases, but it's not usually a fun game of tag. God chases because it's a matter of life and death. And he'll throw whatever he's got to throw at you to get you to stop. Because he loves you. And sometimes that means throwing a storm at you that destroys your life. Sometimes it means throwing anything he can at you to get you to stop. Whatever stick will go in the wheels of that bicycle, we'll shove in there to get you to stop. But we get so distracted and we get so pulled in ourselves and we're trying to avoid looking God in the eye so much that we don't even see it. But the people around us, even the people who don't believe in God, can see it. And God sent a pagan ship's captain to say, arise and call out to your God. And they said to one another, come, let us cast lots, that we may know on whose account this evil has come upon us. So they cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. We talk about casting lots, and we can talk about a lot of things, okay? There's the Jewish way of casting lots, which they had a couple of special stones that they would use to do things. But when it says casting lots, what they're doing is they're shaking a magic 8-ball, okay? Whether it's chicken bones or it's dice or they're all drawing straws, whatever it is, they're doing something to try to figure it out. They're trying to divine who's at fault here. And they cast lots, and whether God paid attention to the lots the rest of the time or not, he paid attention this time. And the lot fell to Jonah. And they said to him, okay, we've drawn straws. You got the short straw. This is your fault. We still haven't narrowed it down to which God is upset, but we know that you're the problem. Tell us on whose account this evil has come upon us. What's your occupation? Where do you come from? What's your country? And of what people are you? Why do they ask all these questions? Because they're still trying to narrow down which God is angry. Right? As far as they were concerned, gods are regional gods. They're gods of a specific area. Or they're gods that are affinity gods. They're of a specific kind of power or specific place of, specific body of water. Or, there's those things. They're like, okay, we got to narrow down which God you're from. So where do you work? So is there a God of your specific trade that's upset? Or where do you come from? Is there a regional God that maybe has some friends over here and this God's causing us some problem? What's your country? What people are you from? And he said to them, I'm a Hebrew. And I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land. And the men were exceedingly afraid and said to him, what have you done? And the thing is, we're going to find out in just a minute. We'll just read this. For the men knew that he was fleeing from the presence of the Lord because he told them. He told them when they got on the boat. They said, hey, so you want to buy a ticket on a ship? That's cool. Is this business or pleasure? He said, no, I'm just running from my God. Okay. All right. Well, your God is clearly going to be the God of this specific region, so as long as we get out of here, we're going to be fine. That's fine. Run from your God. But he said to them, no, my God is not a regional God. My God is not an affinity God. My God is not the God of a specific power or place. My God is the Lord, the God of heaven. We're not talking about the spiritual plane of heaven. This is the sky, okay? I am the God of the sky who made the sea, so the God of the sky, the God of the sea, and the God of the land. And they said, you ran from the God of the sea on a boat? What? See, these guys were all like, okay, our gods, they're specific, and we're away from them right now. It's a long-distance call. We can't really get anything from them. But Jonah, you're telling me your God made everything. You worship the creator of all things, who made every spot on this planet, who made every drop of water that we're running on, who made the trees that we cut down to build this boat, and you're telling me you're running from him to where? How far do you think you're going to go and be able to get away from the God who made all this stuff? I'm going to Tarshish. Tarshish? You think the God who made everything didn't make Tarshish? And you're going to run from him there? He said, I am a Hebrew, and I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land. And the men were exceedingly afraid because the people around him had enough sense to know that you can't run from the creator of all things on the place he created. You can't hide from him in his own house. And they said to him, what shall we do to you? What punishment do we have to give? Can we give a sacrifice? Can we cut your arm off? What do we do that's going to make this God happy? That the sea may quiet down for us, because the sea grew more and more tempestuous. I'm glad I didn't mispronounce that word. I feel like that would be a rough one. Tempestuous. The sea, once they figured out who it was, it's like the storm got worse, and the storm's already so bad that the boat told them, hey, I think I'm about to break up. And the sea got worse, and they said, what do we do? And he said to them, pick me up and hurl me into the sea. That's that word hurl again. Same word that described how God stopped him. He said, pick me up and hurl me into the sea, and then the sea will quiet down for you, because I know it is because of me that this great tempest has come upon you. The men didn't want to do that. They said, we don't want to throw, you're clearly not a great guy because you've got us into this thing, but we're already in trouble with this God. We don't want to murder his servant. We don't want to do this. But the men rowed hard to get back to dry land, but they could not, for the sea grew more and more tempestuous against them. Therefore they called out to the Lord. They stopped going through the yellow pages. They stopped looking for all their own gods. They've got it narrowed down, and they know who the God is that's powerful enough to do this. And they called out to the Lord, "O Lord, let us not perish for this man's life, and lay not on us innocent blood, for you, O Lord, have done as it pleased you." Look, God, we know this guy belongs to you, and we don't want to kill him because you have clearly demonstrated what you do to people who you upset. And we don't want to kill your servant because he belongs to you, and we don't want you to get it worse. But he says this is what it'll take to get the storm to stop. And we tried everything we can. But now we're going to toss him in because we don't know what else to do. So they picked up Jonah and hurled him into the sea. And the sea ceased from its raging. And then the men feared the Lord exceedingly. And they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows. And then the Lord appointed a great fish to swallow up Jonah. And Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. By the way, when did the whale show up? He's not the main character of this story. He showed up at the very end. So what's the point of this? You run from God. You're going to. You have in the past. You're going to again in the future. But know this. Your God, who you fear, does not give up on you and turn his back on you because you ran. But your God pursues you and is willing to throw whatever he needs to throw at you to stop you and to bring you back. And that means that in his love, he will throw a storm at your life. And he will put you through pain and misery until you recognize that you need him and you come back home. He's a good father who loves his children and pursues them all the way to Timbuktu. And the thing is, the answers to what we need to do in this situation are all in this story. What did the captain say? In the middle of the storm, what did the captain say Jonah needed to do to deal with his problem? Arise and call on your God. Stop running from God. Stop distracting yourself with work and with hobbies and just drowning him out with keeping the music loud all the time so you never have to think and you never have to look him in the eye and you never have to face him. Call on your God. Because what he wants is for you to come home. What he wants is for you to turn back to him. And maybe for you, it's not that you're running from God and you're a child of God and you're running from him, but maybe it's that you've been running from him your whole life and he's not your father and you're not his child. Let me tell you what he did for you. Is he pursued you all the way to earth 2,000 years before you got here. And he gave up his own life on a cross to make you his child. He pursued you before you were even born to bring you back to him. And he offers you the opportunity to be saved. He offers you the opportunity to be saved from the storm. He offers you the opportunity to be saved from the consequences of your sin and brought into the family of God. That's what he's chasing you for. And what do you need to do? Call out to him. Ask him for rescue. Do what Jonah did. Confess your sin They said, what happened to get us to this point? I disobeyed my God. I disobeyed him. He told me to go. I got up and went. And what he wants is for me to come home. Confess your sin. Rise, call on your God, and confess your sin. And finally, hurl yourself back into his arms. You know, we look at them throwing him in the water and we think, man, I guess that's a suicide thing. Like he said, I'm going to give up my life to save all of you. But what did he say his God was? Who did he say his God was? My God is the God of the sky, the sea, and the land. And when they picked him up and hurled him into the water, they weren't hurling him in there to die. They were hurling him into the arms of his God. And what did God do? God rescued him. That whale, we get the Jonah and the whale and Pinocchio stories mixed up, I think. Because the fish that God sent to rescue him was not a punishment. It was rescue. And when you rise up and call out to your God and confess your sin and ask for rescue, what he does is he opens his arms wide for you to come home. So hurl yourself off the boat and back into the arms of the God who loves you and wants you to come home. And he will send rescue. It may not be the rescue you want. It may smell bad. It may be a story nobody believes. But your God waits with open arms to rescue and bring you back home. And I think the most important thing about this, we talk about these missions that God gives, and we talk about prophets, and we always think of the point of the story is that the people who will hear the story are changed, but that's not what God did here. God used Jonah's situation to bring other people to know him too. And what God wants out of the storm in your life, what God wants out of you running from him right now is for you to turn around and turn back to him so that the people around you might come to place their faith in him too. The sailors at the beginning of the story are calling on every god they can think of, but at the end of the story, what are they doing? They're offering sacrifices to the one true God who welcomed his child home when he ran. Are you running from God today? You hiding from God? Trying to drown him out? So that you don't have to face your sin, and you don't have to face what you've done, and you don't have to face where you've been. You wonder why everything around you in your life seems to be blowing up. Everybody else can see it. No matter how well you think you're hiding it, everyone else can see it. And the answer to what you need to do is found right here. If you don't know God, call out to him and ask for rescue, because he waits for you to come home. And if you do know him, remember that you are a child of God. He died to save you, and he wants you back. So stop running. Stop worrying about what everybody else is going to think, because what everybody else is going to think is look at that God who takes his child back, and come back to him. Our Heavenly Father, we come before you today, and I thank you so much that you've given us this story. I thank you so much that you took the life of Jonah in his disobedience and you used it to bring people who did not know you to you. I thank you that even though Jonah was yours and he ran as far as he could get to stop having to look at your face, Lord, you pursued him and you welcomed him home. And I thank you that you offer us that same thing. If there's someone here today, Lord, that is not yours, and they've spent their entire life in this storm, spent their entire life in that boat running from you, I ask that today they would stop and they would place their faith in you and they would come home. If there is a child of God here today that's been pursuing you and they don't want to admit their sin, they don't want to deal with their sin, they just want to keep running and hiding because they're ashamed to look you in the face and they're scared of what you're going to ask them, Lord, I ask that they would see this story and see that the storm only gets worse because you love them enough to bring them home. And I ask that they would stop their running today and come back to you. And Lord, let us be like you. Let us be people who will receive those back to us who have strayed, who have run away, who've moved on, and that you pull back to us. Let us be people who pursue the way you pursue. Let us be people who forgive the way you forgive. And let us be people who welcome back the way you do. It's in Jesus' name I pray these things, Lord. Amen.